Welcome back to the channel, Bridging the Gap, Student to Engineer, where STEM professionals provide advice to students. Today is a nationwide data review, not for a specific school. This is an aggregation report that is put together by the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or NACE. It is their first destinations for the college class of 2024. These are published in November of the following year, so this is the latest report. We're going to look at it at a high level. We are able to dive into engineering majors specifically, and so look at that compared to everything else. But with that, let's just get right over to the report. The First Destinations report for the college class of 2024 was published in November of 2025. We will go through a few things in this report, and then we'll provide you a link in the description of the video, so go check that out if you're interested in more details. The report starts by defining what is the class of 2024, and so we see this in the dashboards that we see on a lot of schools that are following the standard. But the class of a year runs from those who graduated July 1st of the previous year through June 30th of that year of the number. So in this case, the class of 2024 is counting those who graduate between July of 2023 and June 30th of 2024. The reason that we use this report and this data and the standard is because it is the most comprehensive view of graduate outcomes available for schools within the U.S. As you can see by the overall data that they provide here, those schools that are reporting into this report that we're looking at and the dashboard that we will also look at after this represents about 28.9% of all bachelor's degree graduates during this time, which is a statistically significant sample, meaning that it should represent the entire population. On this channel, we focus on STEM degrees, and so we talk a lot about the schools of engineering. As we go through this report, we just need to remember and remind ourselves that this is the overall for the bachelor's degrees of any sort. Once we get into the dashboard, we'll get into engineering specific. A highlight of the data for this year is that of the students represented in the data that's reported by their colleges, 86% of them were employed or enrolled in further education within 6 months of graduation. So that's slightly up from the class of 2023. And as we're looking at this data across colleges, it is important to understand where that school hits relative to the average across all degrees and all schools across the U.S. This page also has some good pieces of data for someone who might be considering what level of degree to get. This is, again, for all majors, not just specific to engineering. Overall, master's degree students have a slightly better career outcome than undergraduate students. We're looking at 88% versus 86%. Definitely not something that's huge, or maybe not even statistically significant. One thing I do want to point out is on the bottom here where we've got associates has a much higher career outcome rate than the other types of degrees, particularly higher than bachelor's and master's. That is countered by what is discussed on a few pages later, which I will go down to. So if you just look at the pay difference from all graduates with a certain degree type between 2023 and 2024, the associate's pay dropped significantly. The change in pay for new grads with bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees are all under the inflation rate, but they're definitely not a significant drop that we're seeing in the associates. The report doesn't have any specific information about that or why it is, but I would just say that if you are looking at the student outcome rates of an associate's versus getting a bachelor's or a master's and thinking, you know, associates is a much better way of getting a job or more secure, just to consider that that pay may not be what you're looking for. Another thing to look at, if you are considering what level of degree to get, the difference in salary between a new master's grad and a new bachelor's grad has shrunk over the last 10 years. Now, there is a difference. So if you do get a master's, you can expect to start making more money. But the significant increase that we used to see for new master's grads is not as much as it used to be. Now, one thing just from my personal experience is that typically when we look at hiring new engineers, when we hire someone with a master's, it's equivalent to hiring someone with 2 years of experience. So if you're taking 2 years to get your master's and you're then going to start a new job, you're going to start at this possibly the same or around the same pay as you would have if you got that job right out of getting your undergrad degree and had been working for those 2 years. Near the bottom of this report, NACE provides a list of reporting institutions. This is a really nice list to have because that's a starting point for understanding which colleges and universities may report the data that we're looking for when we look for data for student outcomes when comparing schools. What I have discovered and what I am seeing is that not all of these schools provide the data publicly. Um, they will report it to NACE and will be included in this report. But when it comes to sharing it on their website, they need to aggregate it so that we're not able to see specific results from specific students. And some schools just don't take that step. What I recommend is looking at our video about how to choose a school. I'll provide a link here, and that walks you through looking up the data for the schools that you're considering and how to use that data. If you don't immediately find that data, you might come here and look at if the schools that you're looking at or the school you're trying to find is on this list. We do a lot of videos reviewing the engineering and sometimes more generally STEM majors for schools. So that's also somewhere to look in our video library. But it might be good to look here and see if your school does actually collect the NACE compliant data and see if you can find it publicly. You can also just leave a comment and we will do that work for you. We have contacted several schools asking them for data that's not publicly available. Some of them provide it and some of them don't. So where I am now is the First Destinations dashboard. This is linked in the NACE student survey report as the interactive dashboard. So we'll pull out a few pieces of information from this and hopefully it will be helpful. So we're starting at all bachelor's recipients for the class of 2024. The mean starting salary is $66,000. The career outcomes rate is 85.7%. So this is of all majors. That's important to know when we start looking a little bit more closely at engineering and comparing that to how you might do if you were majoring in something else. So overall, 60% of new grads with bachelors across the US are employed. 51% are employed full-time. So that gap there is, part-time or other things that are counted on here. And overall, about 22% are continuing their education. So just as a starting point, I am going to go over to the academic program filter. And what I'm going to do is choose engineering. And let's just compare what's over here with the standard population of bachelor's grads. So the median starting salary is the first thing that I notice, $80,000 compared to $66,000. That's a pretty significant change or difference and compounds over your career. Student outcome rate or career outcome rate is slightly higher than the average student. So a little bit better, but not significantly. Also, the employed overall is a little bit higher. Again, not significantly. And the full-time is much closer to the employment overall. So that's a good thing. That really means that, when our engineering grads are graduating, that they are getting full-time jobs, and we hope that they're getting those jobs in the degree area that they got their degree in. So one thing I want to note, and I'm not going to click through all of these, I'll click through a few of them, but when we talk about career outcome rate, okay, so average for engineering is 86.9. There are a few of these majors on the side that are below 80, and then there are a few that are over 95 and over 90. So I would just say, if you're thinking about going into some of these that are the lower areas, that you should consider. Just consider if this is what you want to do, and if you have a way of making yourself more marketable so that you're more likely to be in the percent that have that positive outcome rate. So computer engineering, the decrease in this has been significant, and it has been recent. So I don't know what the future is going to hold, but for right now and 2024 grads, and I would say expecting the same or similar for 25 and 26 grads, the computer engineering is lower. The mean salary is higher, but the outcome rate is slightly lower. And then the other thing is engineering science. Now there are 41 grads in all of the US. The median starting salary is lower than most engineers, and then the outcome rate is significantly lower. So those are on the negative side. If we look at the positive side, which I like to be positive, metallurgical engineering, now again, there's a very small number here, but they had a career outcome rate that was 100%. Really good stats, and pretty much all grads that are coming out of metallurgical are getting where they want to be. Now, closely behind that is mining and mineral engineering. There is a resurgence of mining right now in the US, and so this is following on from that. Very small numbers of total grads, but there are schools that have really great mining programs that you can definitely check out. Nuclear engineering, nuclear is getting a renaissance, and there is a lot of demand for nuclear right now. So those three majors, really good results. Over 95% of the grads are getting jobs right away. If we look at the majors that are over 90%, so I consider 90% and above really being successful, what we're seeing is that civil engineers are in that category. Now, these mean starting salaries are a little bit lower than the average, and I attribute that to some civil engineers, particularly those like in water resources and environmental, going to work for municipalities that generally pay less. But there are a lot of civils, particularly civils that are structural, are going into careers that are making just as much as everyone else. And I'm personally a civil engineer by education, and I make a very healthy salary. So this is something that is a really good starting point for anybody wanting to go into construction, infrastructure development, all of that. Civil engineering is a good starting point for that. Materials engineers, also a really good area to go into. Lots of development, not that many grads, but definitely over 90% success rate. Closely aligned with civil engineering, but also including lots of other disciplines is construction, construction management, construction engineering, over 90%. Also small numbers across the US, but a good place to start. And then manufacturing. So again, when we talk about resurgence, there's a lot of manufacturing going on in the US right now, a lot of resurgence of that. If you don't know of any schools that have manufacturing engineering, you might also look at industrial engineering as a way to get into that, but specific programs for manufacturing engineering, really good outcomes. As you're going through the process of choosing a school, there are a lot of things to consider. We go through that in our video about choosing a school. I'll provide the link here. But one of the big things is just really being able to compare one school to another. There's going to be a lot of puts and takes. You're able to compare schools side by side for as many attributes as possible on even playing field. You'll be able to make a much better choice for yourself, for your family, for the student if you are not the student. And being able to compare student outcomes, I think, is one of those keys. This report, this NACE report, aggregates a lot of schools across the US. And so your ability to just take the data from the school you're really considering and looking at what NACE says will give you a pretty good and pretty immediate way of measuring that school against the rest of the crowd, if you want to look at it that way. So I hope this has been helpful. If you do have questions about how to use this or any other data, or if you're concerned about what direction you're going into as far as choosing a school or a major, please leave a comment in the on this video and we will get back to you. And until then, have a great day.